Hey everybody, it's Teepa, and I have two guests here today. One is Debbie Binkley, and she is a spouse and a care partner for someone living with frontal temporal dementia. And the other person we have with us is one of our friends, Marianne Oglesby-Sutherly. And these two women have been working in the world of frontal temporal dementia, among other places, for quite a while. But I'm going to kick us off by having Debbie talk about the man she married and who he was shortly before, what he did with himself and who he was shortly before he developed frontal temporal dementia, and we'll start there. Let's start with that.
Okay. My husband was a very busy man all of his life. From our earliest marriage, he actually worked two jobs. He started out as a teacher in public schools, and he also worked with the church. So he was like associate minister. He taught Bible classes. So he coached youth baseball. He was just a very busy person.
Now, did you have kids, Debbie?
We did. About 4 years into our marriage, we had our first child. So we had two children, grown, of course.
So you had kids. So he was a dad and a father and a teacher. What did he teach?
He was an elementary school teacher.
Oh, my heavens. Oh,
yes.
A male elementary school teacher. Those are very special guys.
Yeah. Well, and then he became a principal after a few years.
Okay.
So he was a principal, and then had all of his other responsibilities. So he spent a lot of time in this room that we're in right now, studying and preparing lessons. And he was a well-respected man.
Yeah. So
he was a mentor to a lot of people.
Was he a principal of an elementary school?
He was most of the time in elementary school. He was also a middle school principal for a time in a private school.
Working a lot with younger kids who were not well developed emotionally or physically and would have meltdowns, and teachers who would be trying to help kids and families. So he was used to a lot of stuff going on that he had to figure out how to manage and problem solve and hold it all together and not be out of control himself.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And well respected for it.
Yes, he was. He was a mentor to a lot of people too, counseled people, and he was very involved in people's lives.
So a real involved guy. So what were the first indicators? How old was he, and what was the first indicators that something was going on that wasn't typical for him and how he lived?
I would say he was about 59 years old. He just started having trouble keeping up with the demands of his job. He would come home just really, really discouraged and tired, and he would just go to bed as soon as he got home because he was just really depleted. That was in 2012, I guess it was. 2012.
So it was mostly fatigue and exhausted, and it was so much work and not feeling rewarded anymore by doing the work, but being beat down by the work. Did he ever not want to go to work at that point?
He loved his job. So I would say, no, it didn't really get to that point, but it became so hard for him that we started to talk about maybe it was time for him to retire. He had had enough years with the school system to retire, even though he was when he retired, he was 60. So that was very young.
So he was super young. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, teachers do retire early. Principals, as a rule, don't necessarily retire that early. They tend to stay a bit longer, but he just was not, he was just exhausted, not feeling the joy of it by the end of the day.
Right. And then after that, I don't know, maybe the first year that he was retired, he just didn't seem to be motivated to do very much after he retired. I just sort of chalk that up to he was he was just tired after
Those
35 years of the routine that he had done.
Did he stop doing the other stuff too, like the coaching and the counseling and the work at the church?
He was still doing some of the work at the church, but that was getting harder for him too. Okay. So he started to have then the communication problems, forgetting people's names, people that he had known all of his life. Couldn't come up with a name. He would talk all around the name, describe the person to me, but he couldn't find the name.
If you gave him the name, did it stick, or did he say, "Oh yeah, that's who I was talking about," or it didn't seem to really make a strong connection?
Yes, he did. When I would tell him, when I would give him the name, he'd say, "Oh yeah, that's it." So it was just people names at first, and then it became names of places. Like he'd be out, and I would ask, "Well, where did you go today?" And he said, "Oh, you know that store up there, that orange place." Well, it was Home Depot.
Home Depot. Right. Yeah. So trying to use colors to describe nouns because wasn't able to come up with a noun to describe things. And did he do any getting lost, or was it all just not being able to find words at that point?
He didn't get lost. He got lost one time, and I think he was probably just distracted and he missed the turn. But he really didn't get lost much. That really wasn't a part of it. He still does have a pretty good feel for places, for where he is at any given time.
He's observant about an environment, in other words.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. So he got to where language wasn't a strong thing for him. I mean, being able to talk about things got more and more difficult. Did he seem to get frustrated with that, or he just would, well, never mind?
I would say it was more that, not terribly frustrated. But then it kind of morphed into he didn't recognize things, like the remote control or his car keys or his wallet or just objects.
Did he know how to use objects? Could he figure out what to do with them once he got them in his hand?
No, not much. No. He got to where he couldn't use his cell phone. He couldn't use the remote control. Just object recognition became a problem.
Did he, you have a whole library of books. Was he doing anything with the books anymore?
It was kind of funny. He has a big collection of Abraham Lincoln books. And he would get those books and just take highlighters and mark through them like he was reading. And I don't know if he was actually reading. I'm not sure, but he did try to read that way. And he can still read a little bit, but, not a lot. Yeah.
Not a lot, and probably not for comprehension, but he still has the ability to see a word and read a word. See a word and read a word. So he can, if he runs his finger or someone puts a line under, or you were to run your finger, he could follow along and read some.
Some. So,
yes. Does it seem like anymore there's a comprehension of reading? So Abraham Lincoln was whatever president of the United States. You think I know that, but I can't remember.
16.
I was going to guess 16th, but then, then I knew there was the Gettysburg Address and all that, so I wouldn't be hesitant about that. Do you think comprehension when you talk about things, or not so much?
Not so much.
Okay.
That became a real problem. That he couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand him. He would get really frustrated.
And then he couldn't figure out how to use things. So that's another level of frustration, because I don't know what it is and I don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
And you can't tell me. So what ended up happening that got it to a head? How long did it take for you to get a diagnosis?
Actually, we didn't try to get a diagnosis for a long time because he didn't want to. He didn't want to. He didn't think anything was wrong. That's which is pretty common, I think.
Yep.
So it was 2021 before we actually got a diagnosis. And he had been...
Oh my, wow. You went a long time with trying to live with, wow.
It was well into it.
2012 to 2021.
Yes.
Holy moly, Debbie.
He was still driving. And I knew that probably wasn't the best thing, but that's a hard thing to deal with. So he was out one day. He got into a situation. It wasn't a criminal thing, but it was a sticky situation involving the police. Oops. And fortunately, the police recognized that something was wrong, and they sent him to the hospital. So while he was at the hospital, they did a neurology workup and did a CT scan. And that's when something showed up, his left temporal lobe. And that's when I just insisted that we see a specialist. Yeah. But I had to use a little subterfuge to get him to do that. But we did finally see a neurologist. Yeah. And I had suspected all along that it was PPA. Because I had, in all of those years that it had been developing, I had read a lot, and it just seemed to fit his symptoms. Yeah. In fact, that's what it was: primary progressive aphasia.
Okay.
The semantic variant.
The semantic variant, which meant he couldn't get the words to work for him at all, and he was also then struggling to get your words to work for him at all. So he couldn't get data in and out. So where do you think the next place in his brain it went? Where was the next area that you started to see? I mean, I would say it was the frontal.
Exactly.
It was. Because of the sequencing and the inability to recognize an object and visual. You started to see some visual shift too.
Right.
He couldn't recognize and use objects, but he just could not figure out, what do I do? What do I do now? What do I do next?
Right.
And he would make big mistakes and get excited about something and head out to go do something, but with no in between where I am and where I'm going. And, oh, geez, you're going across the street. You've got to look both ways.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And you're right. It was the frontal lobe. He started to have behavior issues. That was after the hospitalization, after the diagnosis. He didn't drive anymore after that. So he was restless, and he just needed something. So I got a friend of his to come and take him out once a week. Okay. Somebody that he had taught in school many years ago. Good. That worked well for a while. Okay. Also, in 2022, early 2022, we found Marianne. That was a godsend.
So you started being at the the respite program.
Yes. Yeah. That was great for him. He loved it. It gave him something to do and a place to go where he could just be himself.
He was needed. He felt needed and belonged and felt comfortable and felt competent.
Right, exactly.
Going to school and having a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the behavior issues started to ramp up a little bit more. As his ability to do things for himself got worse, he was very resistant to having me help him very much. That was a hard thing.
Wives aren't supposed to do that for husbands. I mean, that's not what you do. Nobody does that for me. I do it for myself.
Exactly. And then he had a little altercation with his caregiver, the one who came. They'd been friends for a long, long time, and he ended up leaving after that. So how many friends did you still have left by then, Debbie, that were really active in your life? Over that 2012 to 2021? A few. I was still working until 2018.
Okay.
So, several.
Okay.
5, 6, maybe. Yeah.
5 or 6. Okay. What about the faith community you'd been part of?
I'm sorry?
What about the faith community that y'all had been part of?
Well, we continued to be a part of that until early 2022, I guess.
Okay.
So people were supportive. Everybody knew there was something wrong because he was still teaching his class actually until COVID hit. And then we were not going to church at all for a while.
Okay. Yeah, there was COVID in there. Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, people were concerned about him. And then in 2022, we just had to stop going to church because, and I know I've heard you talk about this, but his his behaviors were very disruptive. Well, let's put it that way.
He probably said or did something that wasn't expected at church.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
well, join the party. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Oops.
But so yeah, the behaviors just became more of a situation for us.
Yeah.
Mary Ann can probably take it from there.
More of a challenge just to maintain him being clean, him being okay, him eating well, him sleeping okay. Were other things starting to show up too, or was it mostly around body hygiene where the big issues were?
A lot of it was just around body hygiene. A lot of it was.
The thing that we tend to view as ours and ours alone to be done or not done, this case may be. So, okay. So we some of that happened, and then it came to a head where you were pretty much on your own.
Well, he had some issue. Nothing. I mean, I'll let Mary Ann talk about that. I think she's already told you about that, what happened there. I tried to get an in-home caregiver. She came a couple of times, and he just was not going to have it. Because he'd spent all those years in schools. It was just a part of his being that you're not alone in a room with a woman, and he didn't want to be in the house with me leaving and her being
there. Yeah.
Yes.
That's not an acceptable thing. That'll get you in trouble with every school board that was ever put together.
Exactly. Yep. So that was where we were.
Oh boy. Oh boy. So in some ways, it would have been so much easier if he was much more less memory able and actually more out of it memory wise. I'm going to say out of it, less able to remember his life and more accepting of assistance because he didn't remember being independent. He didn't remember that you're not allowed to be with women. You didn't remember that those things weren't okay. Because he did have that memory, he was absolutely adamant that you were not going to mess with him but he also was adamant you as his wife weren't going to be his carer. I mean, that's not what wives do.
Right.
So that was a problem.
But you mentioned memory. Even to this day, and that's been almost a year ago when the incident happened with his caregiver, the first caregiver, he still talks about that. And he says, I really messed up. It bothers him, that relationship ended, and he says it was his fault. So he still knows that.
Yeah. So this is one of those things where people who have frontal temporal dementia, people think they don't care anymore. It's like, I care as I can. I'm not choosing to care. I'm so sorry that I did something. I didn't mean to do it at the time, but it happened and I can't take it back. And that memory thing, that's really sad that it's still there because he holds it and he can't let go of it, but he can't fix it. And it's like, you can ask for forgiveness and be done, but that's not really an option when, it changed everything. I mean, it really changed everything and he gets that it changed everything. So then, Mary Ann, you got involved and you tried first. And we talked about he was in the program for a while. And then things got a little dicey and it got a challenge because you guys aren't allowed to do stuff in the back. You're not allowed to do a lot of things. You're like really limited because you're a respite program. And if you step over that line, people are waiting for you to step over that line so they can say,
yeah.
Do that. So it puts you in an awkward place. But then Debbie was really all alone.
Right. And, I was teaching at a music school when this incident happened, so I wasn't there. And I said, of all times, then I felt bad because I wasn't there when it all took place. But for the staff, to be honest with you, I don't even remember really what the issue was. My
Isn't
thought
that funny
process,
how we don't remember?
I know. I just don't remember exactly what it was over. But I do know that at the time, Debbie was the main concern right here because I knew what was going to take place. That was that she was going to now be a sole provider for someone with no avenue. He wouldn't have a caregiver. He wouldn't go anywhere else other than the veranda. And he loved the veranda. And even when he wasn't coming, he still wanted to go. He just didn't realize what was happening, in the program itself. And so I had to call Debbie from the music school. I took some time and I called her, and I will never forget that conversation. I said, Deb, I said, hey, Deb, how are you? And she goes, well, I've been dreading this call, because she knew. Well, then that made me cry, and she was crying. And I said, I don't know what to do. Let's try to find plan D and F, E, whatever we're looking for now. But for right now, I do have a room full of people. And so when someone, whatever the incident was, it wasn't really even that bad. It was just loud. And Ricky was a gentle giant here. He never, ever, other than when he wanted something, he wanted it now. And he wanted it the way he wanted it. And when that didn't take place, then he would get agitated. But this was different. And so that was in July, the middle of July. And I think he was home. Was he home about a month?
Yes.
It was about a month. And so I felt so bad for Deb, because she was literally couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. And so I think I even talked to you, Teep. I told you what we were going to do, that Libby and I, the lady here that works with me, we just could not take it. I loved Ricky. I loved Deb. And this was just wrong, and every avenue wrong. But I knew Ricky, if he remembered me, if he just remembered that I was a person that was good to him. And so I said, we'll come on Saturday. You go wherever you want to go for 4 hours. I said, Libby, will you go with me? She said, sure. So we met there. And when we drove up that day, Ricky was standing outside in the driveway, and he threw his hands up and he goes, oh, oh, oh. And I went over and hugged him. And I said, we're going to have some fun today, Ricky, just like at the veranda. He said, yeah. And so we go in the house, we sit there and we talk and we sing, and Debbie left. And I sent you a video, and I said, does this look like somebody that I really can't handle? Because in my mind, it had already started. Okay, if today works good, we're going to try this again. And so I looked at Libby. I said, can we do it? She said, I think we can. And so I told Debbie, when she got in, I said, bring him Tuesday. And so she did. And we kept him until he was placed at a later date. And we never had it was just like a little time period there that he needed to readjust his life. And it didn't mean that every day was rosy, but he never, ever. I could walk over there and he would smile at me and hug me, and we'd sing and we'd talk about the Opry. We talked about clocks. His father was a clock maker. And so he could tell you about all the parts of a clock. And we just never had really huge.
I want you to realize this is a man who hardly has language. And so when she's talking about, he talks about clocks, this is the skill that we use to allow conversations to take place, where he actually has very little responsibility for coming up with stuff. But the way it makes it just feels like we're equally sharing the conversation. But somehow he doesn't have to work real hard to feel like he's doing his part. And it feels so good that he then can do some talking, because it's spontaneous talking. It can't be something that you ask him a direct question and he knows the answer to it. Just this back and forth that suddenly builds into, then he gives you a whole explanation of something. It's like, well, where did that come from? And it only happens when you're in your good spot. You're in the, in the zone.
In the zone. And his son, really cool. His son sang at the Grand Ole Opry and played. And so it was a big deal for the entire family. And here again, I don't want to start crying. And so, Deb, it was that special event that we all knew once Ricky went to the Opry, once Ricky saw his son do what his son had always wanted to do, because I believe the heart will win out when the brain doesn't quite function as well as it should. His heart was going to win out that night. And Deb was worried, oh, what do I do? We're down close. What if he wants to, You know, we had all these what ifs. And so we would calmly chat through them all. And I said, we have to do this. You have to do this. It's great for your son. He wants to do it for his dad. It was a whole family event.
Yep.
And until the day Ricky was placed, even that day, we talked about the Grand Ole Opry. And we talked about his son singing there and how proud he was. And Ricky has the biggest smile that I can think of. He has the most gentle smile, and he was so proud of his son. And at that point, love won because he had a great evening. It was the time we all dreaded, and we already knew that placement was going to have to take place, but we just didn't know how. And everyone's heart was broke, yet there was that gentle giant that was so proud of his son. It was an amazing thing to see for days after.
Yeah.
All you had to do is talk about a song, a son, and it was his father's, I think it's his father's son that wrote it. So it was a family thing that Ricky knew and he could hold on to. And so, I had to take him back. And I texted you and I said, so what do you think? You said, I had no doubt. No doubt, So, hey, it worked. It worked. And that's what we do.
Yeah. And so this is a rough journey, though, because after the placement, the placement was hard. The reason for the placement was hard because you just couldn't do it anymore. He wasn't allowing it anymore. It got dangerous. It got risky for you to try to do this alone. And he wasn't able to handle the transitioning here and there and otherwise. It was getting rough. And so he needed a permanent space. And for a good long while, it was like, it wasn't sure we were going to find one that was going to work. Because, folks get so scared of FTD and so scared that what drugs are you going to be on? We need lots of drugs, so we'll be able to do this. We're going to need to give him lots of drugs. And it's like, well, I'm not sure that's the answer. Yes, you may need something, but you don't need to take an elephant down. You just need to touch. You need to touch so that he's in a good place, that same kind of space. And Marianne did this masterful, and we talked about that transition. So over the course of this condition, this is the courageous conversation part. What was some of the really bad stuff, would you say? What were some of the hardest, baddest parts for you?
Well, like you said, the loneliness, the isolation.
Has that gotten better since he's been placed?
Some better.
Some.
I find it interesting that I thought I would get out and do a lot of things, and I just haven't really.
Not yet.
Not yet. I will. I did take a little weekend trip with my daughter and her family, Easter weekend, and that was really nice. That was good. But it's not a quick turnaround. Really, no. It takes a little while.
Yeah. Have you had anniversary dates since he's been placed? Like he was here last year and he's not here this year for the first time?
Oh, no, not yet. It's been about 3 months. He's been there about 3 months now.
Okay.
So we have some family.
And it was a good idea then, I'm going to say, that your daughter invited you and you went on that holiday so you weren't just around the house remembering last Easter.
Yes, you're right. It was good being with my grandchildren. It was a good thing.
Yeah. So what else would you say was really hard or bad about this condition and the life with it?
Well, it just changes your whole relationship with a couple.
Yeah.
You go from
lost your spouse. You lost a partner spouse. And you became a caregiver, and you tried to be a care partner. You tried to always partner with Ricky, but it really was giving support and care. And he wouldn't let you because he remembered enough of the spouse role that he wasn't willing to let you do it, but you weren't then able to help in the way that you wanted to help.
Right. There were things that had to be done.
Yeah.
And it was just difficult to have that role change.
Yeah. And you also had to take on a whole bunch of roles that you may not have had before. Like, for instance, I can imagine trying to get Social Security worked through at age 60.
Yes. We actually held off on that, though. He had his pension from the school system. So we waited until he was 70 for that, which helps a lot now for paying for his care.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. Well, that was super smart. Did somebody give you that support and advice, or did you figure it out yourself, or was it just luck?
That's just part of my research.
Oh.
During the whole, I realized that something was happening, and we need to be prepared. So
Okay. All right. So have you saved half of all your resources for you?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like as a couple, you have lots of resources as a couple. Did you make
Oh,
sure you divided it in half and held on to half of it so you'll have half when it's your turn to need support and care?
So far we do.
I say that with all honesty because all too often I see partners forgetting that part completely and then realizing, well, there won't. What if something happens to me? Like, yikes. We went through everything, so there isn't anything left. Oh, what will that mean for the family? What will that mean for the kids? Yeah. Yeah. So good for you. I mean, among everything else, you did all this other hard stuff. So let's add that. That's another hard thing, figuring that out. So from what you know now, how often are you able to go spend time with Ricky and keep it at a safe level for both of you?
Oh, that's a good question. What I've run into is he wants me to take him out of there every time I go. He wants to go out just for a ride or whatever. So as soon as he sees me, that's what we have to do.
Out of here. Yeah.
We have to do it, and we have to do it now. Just like Mary Ann said earlier.
Like Mary Ann said. Yes. I need it, and I need it now. So don't be putting your feet down. Just let's go, girl.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Don't stop to talk to anybody. We just go. So that makes it a little difficult to visit. I mean, I can't really visit there at all. No. We have to leave.
So you don't get to develop relationships with people there and build the relationship and build your role there and build an opportunity for you to engage with him there because he doesn't want to be there at all, really, when you're around. He wants an escape. So you're his escape route for getting out of there for a bit.
Yeah. He seems to be fine when I'm not there. He does a lot better when I'm not there.
Well, that's the thing. And so that's why I said, how often can you visit and keep it safe for both of you?
I've been going several times a week, but not every day, maybe every other day.
Okay. And I would say that's probably as frequently as I could possibly recommend. I think if you do it more than that, then you're going to have a hard time getting him out of the car.
Right.
And I'd say, I wouldn't, this is me going, that's really marginal. Don't get it any closer than that.
Right. Any closer than every other day, you mean?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you may need to even back it off a little bit. I'm just saying, because we want to be real careful that it doesn't get desperate and then he won't want to go back, because it is pretty essential.
Yes.
That he be comfortable there and not just escaping there.
Right. He seems to be comfortable there for the most part. Except, of course, he says, I don't want to go back. Don't take me back there.
Yeah, you're not wanting to go back. Yeah, I wish I could, but this time we gotta go back.
Yeah.
So being real careful about that, which means it's hard because you don't ever get to relax, really. You're never relaxed around Ricky anymore.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Now, when we're in the car, though, when we do go out, he's very calm. He's very happy. He's very observant of everything around him. I'll tell Mary Ann this. The place where he stays now is not very far from Gallatin, maybe 7 or 8 miles. So we drove up that way the other day, and we passed that Waffle House, and he said, I need to go there. That's my place. So he remembered after 3 months. Still remembers that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really interesting that for all the hippocampal damage that he has, and he does, but that's not one area where he loves to be, he still recognizes. So that's such a interesting piece.
Yes.
And you know what, Teepa, I haven't gone to see Ricky except maybe the one day after Debbie was the day we did the transition.
Yeah.
When we did the transition, I haven't been but one time. I call to check on Ricky because I am so fearful. If he sees me,
he'll want out.
he'll want out for sure, because I'm the picture of the veranda. Not so much me, it's just that person,
that thing.
That thing that I want to go to, and it's out of here and not in here. So I've even
She
felt
said
guilty.
she was going to buy this place and turn it into the veranda.
That's exactly right.
You know, when we talked about it, I thought, ooh, well, you must be thinking of putting some money together, Marianne, because I'm going to tell you what, that boy's going to hold you accountable at some point.
I know. Oh, that day was something, that the day we did that, because I was flying by the seat of my pants. But I knew he loved me. I knew he loved the veranda. I knew he loved Debbie. So we have all this love fest going on. But there has to be a time. And I could see it was getting harder for Deb. And so she said, do I go? And that was probably one of the hardest things I ever did, was to tell Deb, you need to go.
It was one of the hardest things that Deb ever did.
I did.
Was to do
it. Do it. I know. It was just like, we've got to do it. We both knew we had to do it. But you know what? We sat there and watched TV. And when I got ready to go, I said, I am so thirsty. I have got to have a Coke. Would you like a Coke? No. And I left, and Deb had already gone. And so I think Ricky's heart still won over to a certain extent that day. And I know, Deb, if there is any one woman that I have been in contact with in the last 20 years doing this, before the veranda even, I've never met someone as strong as she has been in order to study, to get on that Frontal Temporal website, to get on your website, to come to support group, to listen. And she never one time came back in a negative way to me. She'd say, well, okay, she might want to think about it, or she might want to ponder on it, but she trusted me because she knew I loved Ricky. It wasn't just her. It was that I loved Ricky. Yes. I didn't want anything to happen to Ricky either. And so
and what we say with love and concern. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't want somebody to visit their husband all the time, but we've got enough background that says that's a risky proposition. And we wouldn't say it if we didn't, in the very heart of our hearts, believe we don't want to rock that boat so hard that Ricky falls over. Right. Because that would be devastating for all involved. And so that's that tricky part about willing to try, not willing to try, willing to risk it, not willing to risk that, because it's too potentially devastating. If we do it and we make a mistake there, yikes.
I think Debbie too knew that it's not the perfect scenario. It's not how we wanted our life to end up. No. It's not what you ever want to do. She knew there were risks involved, but it's so hard to get people placed with frontal temporal, especially where we live. Hard. They'll just tell you no. They won't even assess. I know.
They wouldn't even talk to me.
They will. Yeah. They will not talk to you.
No, I'm sorry.
And if you have somebody who says yes, within 2 days, they'll be saying no.
Exactly.
That's the problem, because they're not prepared and they don't learn from what you share of what works. And so you end up in trouble. So I think the good and the bad and the ugly is frontal temporal is one of the hardest dementias to try to get people to appreciate, because it's so different than Alzheimer's. And it happens to younger people, and people look and say, well, I mean, he does fine frequently, but then he just doesn't. And it's like, yep, that's accurate. Instead of learning from that and going, oh, okay, so it's sort of unpredictably predictable. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't know which way it's going to go.
But I can tell you it will probably go one or the other if you're not careful.
Right.
So what would you say is the one good thing that has come out of this for you?
Well, finding Marianne really is a godsend. She's a friend that I'll have forever. I know, and she has been such a mentor to me, and such a positive influence in our lives. And she's just made Rick's life so much better. She and the staff there. So it's opened up a whole different window in my life than I had before. So that's one of the good things.
So the door that you thought you were going through didn't happen, but you've got windows open. and you're seeing
Right.
the possibility. And what I'd say is maybe this kind of conversation will change the lives of other people that are out there trying to live with frontal temporal dementia without a Marianne, without a you, without the Ricky being that Ricky. But it offers the opportunity to ask questions, to raise concerns, to find the supports that are needed, so you don't try to do this all alone, failing, and yet not know what else to do, because there aren't a lot of resources out there for FTD if you don't seek them out yourself.
Right.
I mean,
You're not given a handbook when you get the diagnosis. That's for sure.
Exactly. So I want to say, wow, thank you. Thank you for being so honest and for sharing how long it was before you got the support that you needed, but you sort of were figuring out on your own, and how much you continue to honor and respect Ricky as Ricky. Even though more and more of him isn't exactly how it used to be, we still can find Ricky in there.
Yes, we can.
And what's really remarkable is how many people don't understand that or get it. It's like, oh, Ricky's still there. You just have to be.
I'll tell you a conversation that I had recently with someone who asked me what would make things better for you. And I said, what would make things better for me is for people to go see him. Because, and to, just so we'll know we're not alone.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Not being alone is one of the realities. I mean, could we just form community? Could we be okay? Would we be willing to learn a little bit so we could be with Ricky and be comfortable around Ricky? And have him spend some time with somebody who's not interested in, he doesn't then need to ask them to get him out of there, because he's going to ask you that. But then you would have a report of good things happening for Ricky that don't involve you.
He does have friends who take him out. He has a friend who takes him out for lunch about once a week, and another two guys that take him out for breakfast. And they've been very faithful to do that all the way through this whole process. So that's good. Yeah.
Well, you've done a remarkable job, as I know you've worked hard to do, to try to keep a circle of friends for Ricky.
Well, thank you. I think that's important for him, because he's always been such a social person.
And as Marianne said, I think you win the prize for one of the most forward-thinking and willing to give up a relationship to have a relationship women I've ever met. Wow. So as a spouse,
I appreciate that.
That's a hard transition. So thank you for being there for him.
That's where I needed to be.
And thanks for being here so that other people can learn and get an opportunity to listen to what they have no idea about until they are willing to listen. And without these conversations, people can't learn.
Right.
So thanks to both of you for making this available.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right, take care with care. And if you're interested in the other half of the story, we'll make sure there's a link so you can go back and listen to Marianne talking about that transition day and what led to it and how that went and some of the hard things that were going on, because it is hard. There's no doubt in it. It's heart-wrenching to realize this transition has to happen, even though I don't want it to. And I thought maybe we could keep it going, but just isn't going to happen. And there's not one right answer for everyone, but for everyone, we hope we find an answer that works. So take care all.
Hi, I'm Teepa Snow, and you just found our YouTube channel and watched one of our videos. I'm the owner and founder of Positive Approach to Care. Thanks for watching. And if you liked, if you have a comment about, or you would, please share it with people you know. Oh, and if you haven't yet done it, consider subscribing. We'll let you know when the next new video comes out. And you might want to visit our website, www.teepasnow.com, where you'll find other resources as well. See you there.